Hi, this is Daniel, and today I'm going to show you some tips on how to draw cartoon caricatures using pictures. So, to me, using a reference picture is very important when you're drawing a cartoon or a caricature, because you need to have some idea of what the head looks like, or the body. So I think it's very important to have that. Most of these are athletes, by the way, who I'm doing. I also apologize for a few of the pictures that aren't really lined up perfectly, but I think it'll still be helpful. What I'm going to do is just show you some tips of what I do and how I did things, and things that are important on the different faces. I have probably 10 different faces to show, and if there's someone you think I should draw, let me know below in the comments. I might have already drawn them for all you know. If it's an athlete, there's a good chance I've drawn them. But I think the key thing is that you need to know the shape first. And you need to know what you're drawing. A lot of mine I tried to draw as caricatures, but they're not caricatures. They're caricature cartoons, which means they have a little more of a realistic look than a caricature. And so I think that's important to realize if you're going to go all out wacky and really exaggerate things, or if you're just going to make it cartoonish without it being a portrait. Alright, without further ado, let's get to the pictures. So the first picture I have is of Drummond. He's the center for the Detroit Pistons. And right away you can see some basic mistakes that you could say I've made. His hair is not curly, and his I might have exaggerated his left cheek a little. But the thing is, these are cartoon caricatures again. You have some creative freedom to make it interesting. Otherwise, you're going to be really bored. Right away, you can see the nose is a huge deal. Whenever I look at a picture of a cartoon caricature, even the ones I've drawn, the first thing I see is the nose usually. And it's really important to know that. It's an immediate eye-opener, impact. It's not like the ears, for example, which usually aren't unless they're very caricature-like. You can also see, obviously, that I used a number of different things that he has facial hair. I think the eye shape is also very important, but also how you pick the color of the eye. Meaning, are you going to do a more human eye? Are you going to do the eyes that I do, which are basically just cartoon eyes? It's really up to you. It's your choice. I also think just keeping it simple, in this case, really worked, as there's not too much going on, which there will be in some. As you can see with a lot of these, they're pretty realistic. Okay, so this is Andy Samberg. He is from SNL as well as the TV show Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's a great show, by the way. You should watch it. There's some key things here that you'll probably see both with this one as well as the last one of Drummond. First of all, I don't really do curly hair with markers very often. The reason for that is it gets very messy very quickly. Now, some people probably do curly hair. Heck, I know people who do. But I think if you're going to do a full hair, meaning you're not just going to put a few curls in, it's important to make sure it actually looks like hair and not just like a big mess, especially in a photo where he's not like that. You can also see one of the big things I did here is his lip shape is a little bit different. His top lip is a little more lean towards one side than the other, and so I kind of exaggerated that. I mean, it is a caricature in the way that there are some exaggerations. They're just not huge exaggerations, so they look like Bozo the Clown. You can also see that I did things like making his right side very straight. It would be the left side, by the way, of the face, but from looking at it, it'd be the right side, very straight, because that's how it was. But again, it's also just doing that extreme, which is something I highly recommend. As you can see, I also used a different pair of eyes for this. I would highly recommend when you do these drawings to try different things. Otherwise, you're not going to learn. The other key thing that I did with this was obviously adding the different clothing. With most of the athletes, I just added a jersey. Here, obviously, you've got the tie and the shirt and the coat. So, sometimes, obviously, you want to know what the profession is. You know, if it's an athlete, it's more likely to add a jersey. Think Andy Samberg in an Oakland Raiders jersey, for example. I guess Brooklyn Nine-Nine. A Brooklyn Nets jersey, for example, would look kind of strange. Okay, this next one here is of Demi Lovato, one of my favorite people. She's a big mental health advocate. She's diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and she really understands empathy, and I try to put that in my drawings. One thing with Lovato is I really always focus on her eyebrows and her eyes, because she always seems to have a lot of color in her eyes, So a lot of times I'll actually use color in the eyes, even if it's a black and white thing. Shading here is why I picked this photo, though. Obviously, when you're using pencil, you need to shade a lot more, because that's what people expect. And if you want a 3D in general, even if you're using a pen, you really should make sure that you shade a lot. Obviously, another difference here is I didn't use an X, I just drew a head. That's something that's really your choice. You can decide how much or how little something you want to draw. Later, I'm going to show you a Billy Hamilton drawing that is a full body. I don't usually do full bodies drawings, but there are some cases where I do. But when you want a lot of detail in one part and you want one focal point, then you have to make it a smaller part. Another thing that's key here is the nose is very generic. Most of the stuff is very generic. If you want something that's not the nose to be the focal point, then you need to make sure that other things are pretty generic to make sure that the focal point's there. But I also think, again, the shading, obviously when you shade, actually not obviously, I apologize to any new artists, the side of the face is where you're going to be the darkest usually, as well as the nose area, because in real life you don't have those lines on your nose, people just draw them in anyway, so you want to make sure there's some shading there. This next one's of Demi Lovato. I actually call it Demi Watson because my friend thought it looked like Emma Watson. There's a few reasons I picked. Well, number one, it's one that I worked hard on, and I wanted to actually use as an example of what not to do. I had this looking more like Demi Lovato at one point than it does now, but I overdid it and tried to get it too good, even though that sounds weird, and so it doesn't look as good as I would like. Once again, with Demi, though, the eyebrows to me are really important. If you look in the actual picture, her eyebrows are very, very specific, and that's something that's key. Things like the line in her hair, there's that little skin line. I emphasize that because it's something that you have to emphasize. Another difference here is most females have at least, maybe not long hair, but at least the hair that she had in her last photo. Here, it's very short hair. And so you have to still figure out how to make it look more feminine without doing a full body shot. So I think I made the earrings pretty big. I definitely put a lot of purple in the eyes. I hate saying that because I'm not saying purple's feminine, but it just works in this case. And I also worked a lot on the mouth for this one, I remember. I still didn't get this one perfect with the mouth. You have to be really careful with the lips, because having too big of a lips can actually change the whole perception of the person that you're drawing. And so the lips should have been a little bit smaller here. But overall, I really like this piece. I think I did a good job on it. I hope that you like it too, and let's go on to the next one. This one's of David Ortiz, aka Big Papi, the former designated hitter for the Boston Red Sox. One of the reasons I really like this photo of how I did it was I'm not very good at drawing hats, but I made sure the eyebrows were very distinct. But also, I did something that worked for me. Meaning, in the picture, he has 2 rows of teeth smiling. Here, I have 1 row, because that's what works for me. Plus, you have to have your signature on every piece. I used Rouser World for a long time, and Rouser World had the chin where it was a square, so a lot of mine look like that, because that's how I started doing it, at least at first. Also, with him, I tried to make it a little bit of a rounder head, because that's what his head looks like. Drawing the head shape is very important, though. You need to get a correct head shape, otherwise it could look completely either disproportionate or just off in general. I picked this one not due to its quality, but simply due to the full body part of it. This is Billy Hamilton. He plays center field for the Cincinnati Reds, and I used 2 photos for this one, which is why I have 2 photos in there. One thing I think is that the head can be a saving point. The head is so distinct and so detailed that it can kind of a little bit, of course, not completely, save if your body is not perfect. This was pretty early when I was drawing bodies also, so you have to realize that you have to make things look realistic. I would highly recommend practicing these first before you post them or show them or make a final copy of them. But the thing that's key here is the big eyebrows and just the big smile in general. You know, people like a big smile in caricature because people like to smile. Also, I really like what I did with his beard and just in general with his head shape, because in the real picture there's 2 very straight lines just like there is in my head shape, but I also made it my own by making the head shape a little bit taller compared to the roundness of Billy Hamilton's head. This might be my favorite cartoon caricature I've ever done. It's Chris Sale, the Chicago White Sox. And why do I like it so much? The little things. the eyes being straight lines on the inside of the eyes and then having a very specific shape. The eyebrows being very specific in the fact that there's some white in it, just like in his eyebrows, they kind of fade out very quickly. The mustache having two distinct parts and a line in the middle. Even the nose, which I use a square nose, which I usually don't do. And the mouth being very stoic, just like he did. I love this one in the way that you can make it your own and still make it very recognizable. I made it my own with the jersey and the way just I draw in general with the eyes. Obviously, eyes do not really look like that in real life. There is not just one space and a bunch of black in it. That is my style. I also had fun with the ears, making them kind of a little bigger. One thing I should also show is the shoulder muscle, or not shoulder, sorry, the cheek muscle is important. You draw the line next to the ear a lot of times to signify the cheek muscle. A lot of times they're lower though. So that is one other thing to point out. This is Devin Williams, center for the West Virginia Mountaineers. I don't know if he went pro yet. This one's not exactly perfect. If you look at his hair, it's not exactly the same. His eyes aren't perfect. His mouth is open. I actually used 2 photos, I believe, for this one as well, because I wanted one with his goggles on. But I also wanted to show this one for a simple reason. How one feature can change it. In Devin Williams, I saw the goggles. That was the thing. Most basketball players, for those of you who don't know, do not wear goggles. And so by adding that, it's going to make it a little recognizable, even if nothing else does. It's almost like a pirate, for example. If you put a pirate patch on them, they're going to think, hey, an eye patch. You're going to think, hey, that's a pirate. Even if it doesn't look like a pirate. Even if it looks like Madonna, you might be like, hey, that's a female Madonna pirate because of the eye patch. This is Dillon Brooks. He was just drafted in the NBA draft last Thursday. I like this one, and I picked it because there are certainly some distinct differences. Obviously, I really stretched out the left side of his head, which isn't like that in the picture. I actually used my other method later to do a better Dillon Brooks, but I like this one because it still, to me, is recognizable as him. The things like the very sharp eyebrows, the eyes the way I drew them, the nose being very like that, and the smile, in my opinion, the lips are pretty good. Obviously, I used some differences, and I think that's key to realize that if you're doing a caricature, it's really okay to do some differences. A lot of people, if you have key facial features, they will still recognize the person that you are expecting. This is Joe Ross, pitcher of the Washington Nationals. I really like this one and how I did it, because I kept it really simple. Sometimes, when you do a caricature, you overthink it. You think, oh, the nose has to look like Pinocchio, their chin has to droop down all the way to their knees, and their head needs to be the size of a pumpkin. And that's not always the case, especially if you're doing the cartoon version of the caricature. It can really be something simple. Now, obviously, again, the baseball cap, not perfect. But you just look at, you can see the line on the left side. Something that's very simple and easy. Also, the smile lines, as I call them, they're the ones in between the nose, or right next to the nose, and go around the mouth. Those are things that are very simple that I made work. His eyes actually aren't perfect, but pretty much everything else is good in my opinion, and it's just keeping it very simple. Sometimes people go crazy and they go complex with all this stuff, and you just don't need to. You keep most of the basic head if you can. Again, practicing head shapes is something I do all the time. It's really hard. Playing around with head shapes even, just I make a lot of random faces. I can put that up sometime as a video, how to make random faces. And so, it's something to consider, but at the same time, keeping it really nice and easy is important, especially for a beginner. Okay, so the next drawing I did was Kam Chancellor. He's a safety for the Seattle Seahawks. The thing I really focused on here, by the way, besides from missing his 2 ear holes, is the fact that he had a beard. Facial hair can be a really effective way to make a caricature show who it is. I even remember seeing something where they had Abe Lincoln without his beard and people couldn't recognize him, and then once you added the beard, you saw it was Abe Lincoln. Obviously the facial hair here is a little exaggerated, but it's pretty spot on. Not as curly as his, but the thing is, it's what I made the focal point of my piece, I believe, personally. And again, just adding a lot of the lines, like the lines right next to the nose, I think that's really key. Also, I kind of played with proportion here with the forehead. He really does have a big forehead, so I don't know how much I played with proportions. But I think when you're doing a caricature, it's really about exploring what you want to do and having fun with it. That's the thing. This video, drawing, it's supposed to be fun. I'm not trying to do this to torture you. I'm trying to give tips, and I thought this would be a fun way for me to do it, and I hope you get something out of it, honestly. And to me, this was a fun way to do it, as mentioned. So, have fun when you're doing it, and don't be afraid to try something different. What's the worst thing that happens? You get a new piece of paper and draw it again, or you use tracing paper if you really like part of it, and you draw that part again. So, have fun with it. This is arguably my favorite caricature cartoon I've ever done. And the reason is, number one, I love King Felix, aka Felix Hernandez. For those of you who don't know, at games the fans will chant K, 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 which is why there's lots of K's on the paper. K stands for strikeout in baseball, by the way. The thing I really like about this is I kind of played around with the proportions a lot. You know, I moved the chin to the side a little more than usual. There were some pictures, by the way, where his chin was like that. I made his mouth interesting. His mouth shape was really interesting here. You know, the nose is pretty basic, but even his eyes, especially his right eye, has some very interesting characteristics, as does his right eyebrow. And so I think that was the fun of this project, is this was one of my favorite baseball players to draw, and the fact that I really exaggerated the left side of his face. I did stuff with the mouth. I put the little goatee thing under his lip. It was just a fun one to do. The next one is the Magic Man. Earvin Magic Johnson, but when he was with Michigan State University before he was with the Lakers. I picked this one because of one thing, the hair. Magic doesn't really have an afro, but again, having creative freedom when you do these drawings is just so important. Realize that they are your drawings, and if they're recognizable, and even if they're not, it's a learning experience. But if they're recognizable to the athlete, actress, actor, whoever you're doing, then it's a great piece. And I really like what I did here with the eyebrows, for example. Just adding some different takes. Even his facial shape is very different. Now, that might just be me being shaky. I don't actually remember. But a lot with the hair and just playing around with it in general. And I think that's, again, it's so important. I've mentioned a lot of these points more than once. But to play around with it, or to have a unique feature, which you will see in the next drawing. I wonder what people's reactions are at home for this one. When you see Marcus Stroman, pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays, most of the time, he has brown or black hair, very dark hair. And the blonde hair was supposed to prove a point. It's why I picked this one. And that is that it's okay to add something that is exciting. The blonde hair is different. Most of the athletes I do, I either just color in their hair black, even if they don't have black hair, just because it's a black and white picture, or I don't color in their hair at all for a lot of them. But this one, I decided to do blonde, partially because, again, I don't like drawing baseball caps. But doing the blonde hair was a lot of fun, I remember. And then adding the little extra hair was also a unique point. While the eyes, the nose, the mouth, they all look pretty good. Although it is from a straight view and the picture isn't. It's the hair that stands out. It's really okay to have those features that stand out. Otherwise, you're not going to be known. It's just going to be another picture. You have to have stuff that makes it you. For me, for example, one of the things would be the eyes, having the whole black eye drawn in with a highlight. The facial features just in general, even in my more recent pictures, they're very me. I feel like they're mine, my brand, and that's important to me. So you might look at this one of Wriggling Simone from my favorite TV show as a kid, That So Raven, and you're going to wonder, it looks a lot more realistic than the other ones. Well, I wanted to show you another way to draw a face more realistically, and here's how you do it. You take the picture and you print it out, you take a charcoal stick, and you rub charcoal all over. Then you put, the back, and then you put that back on a piece of paper. Using a charcoal pencil, a thick one, you draw over it, and you can get a very basic outline of it. Obviously, I played around with it, and I've also done a number of different ones where I've painted first and then drawn the top on it, mostly with college basketball players. But I thought that this was important to show that if you want to do either a more realistic face, because I wouldn't say it's super realistic, it's just more realistic than the caricatures, or if you want to do a face that you have the outline correct and you know it, then this is a great way to practice. Again, the shading's all me, for example, all of that is all me, and the one thing that you will notice here is you get a lot of charcoal on the paper if you use this method. But I think it's a very effective method. It's also very effective when you then trace over it in pen. Micron is what I would recommend, and then erase the pencil, because then you've got a really precise drawing in pen. When you try it with paint, if you do, And first of all, you need to use a palette knife to make the paint very thin. And secondly, be careful with coloring, because coloring over thick paint can be really, not dangerous, it's not like it's going to blow up or anything, but it can really ruin the piece and the pen as well. I hope this helped somebody. I really enjoyed doing it, to be perfectly honest, but I wanted to use different pictures, a lot of different pieces, to show different techniques and methods, whether it's keeping it simple or adding that one feature or just having a lot of fun with it. I think those are 3 things that I hope you got out of this. You can check out my artwork at The Imperfect Artist on Instagram. Subscribe to my page, like this video, and comment on what you think I should draw, what I should recommend. My next video will probably be on how to draw a weird, wacky face. Thank you, and I'll see you guys soon. Hey!